The description of the medieval warm period and Little Ice Age in IPCC reports has changed since the first report in 1990 as scientific understanding of the temperature record of the past 1,000 years has improved. The medieval warm period and Little Ice Age are the best-known temperature fluctuations in the last millennium. Critics of the hockey stick graph of all subsequent reports have claimed that the record of the MWP and LIA were suppressed in the IPCC Third Assessment Report, although every report has discussed the phenomena. 1990 report. With the growth of interest in global warming in the 1980s came renewed interest in the past temperature record, and the question of whether past times had been warmer or colder than present. However, at that time available records were few. The discussion in Chapter 7 observed climate variations and change of the last 1,000 years occupies less than a page. A schematic curve was used to represent temperature variations over the last 1,000 years in Chapter 7. The vertical temperature scale was labeled as temperature change, but no numerical labels were given. It could be taken to imply that temperature variations of the MWP and LIA were each of the order of 0.5 degrees Celsius from the temperature around 1900. The section specifically states recent climate changes were in a range of probably less than 2 degrees C. The 1990 report noted that it was not clear whether all the fluctuations indicated were truly global. The graph had no clear source and disappeared from the 1992 supplementary report. Within the 1990 report, the LIA is taken to be global in extent, but the MWP is not. Climate over the last 1,000 years is mentioned very briefly in the SPM of the 1990 report. The MWP is not mentioned at all, and a LIA described by probably fluctuated by little more than 1 degree Celsius. Some fluctuations lasted several centuries, including the LIA, which ended in the and which appears to have been global in extent. The MWP is mentioned in the executive summary to Chapter 7 as MWP around 1000 AD. 1992 supplement. The 1992 report used only 2 graphs of pre-instrumental temperatures from. They show air temperature based on documentary evidence in East and North China from 1350 to 1950. Fluctuations are of the order of 0.5 to 0.75 degrees Celsius and indicate variably colder than present temperatures before the 20th century. The graph stops in 1350 and does not show a MWP. The only text reference to the MWP is qualified by "in this region" in boldface. 1995 report. By 1995, research in the subject had advanced and hemispherical reconstructions of temperature were available, though only for the summer season. The 1995 IPCC report used a Northern Hemisphere summer temperature reconstruction from 1400 to 1979 by. This too shows no MWP and colder temperatures otherwise before the 20th century, of the order of 0.5 degrees Celsius colder. Fig 3.21 shows 8 ice core records from 1200 to present, which display a mixed pattern. The MWP and LIA are introduced in the text as 2 periods which have received special attention. These have been interpreted, at times, as periods of global warmth and coolness, respectively. Recent studies have re-evaluated the interval commonly known as the medieval warm period to assess the magnitude and geographical extent of any prolonged warm interval between the 9th and 14th centuries. The available evidence is limited and is equivocal. Quote, after discussing the evidence, he concluded, a clearer picture may emerge as more and better calibrated proxy records are produced. However, at this point, it is not yet possible to say whether, on a hemispheric scale, temperatures declined from the 11th–12th to the 16th–17th century, nor, therefore, is it possible to conclude that global temperatures in the medieval warm period were comparable to the warm decades of the late 20th century. 2001 report. The 2001 report used Northern Hemisphere warm season and annual reconstructions from 1000 AD to present by and the IPCC TAR says of the MWP that the posited medieval warm period appears to have been less distinct, more moderate in amplitude, and somewhat different in timing at the hemispheric scale than is typically inferred for the conventionally defined European epoch. The Northern Hemisphere mean temperature estimates of, and show temperatures from the 11th to 14th centuries to be about 0.2 degrees Celsius warmer than those from the 15th to 19th centuries, but rather below mid-20th century temperature. The TAR discusses was there a Little Ice Age and a medieval warm period, and says thus current evidence does not support globally synchronous periods of anomalous colder warmth over this time frame, and the conventional terms of Little Ice Age and medieval warm period appear to have limited utility in describing trends in hemispheric or global mean temperature changes in past centuries. 2007 report. The 2007 report used more recent temperature reconstructions including, the IPCC concluded the warmest period prior to the 20th century very likely occurred between 950 and 1100. The evidence currently available indicates that NH mean temperatures during medieval times were indeed warm in a 2KYR context and even warmer in relation to the less sparse but still limited evidence of widespread average cool conditions in the 17th century. However, the evidence is not sufficient to support a conclusion that hemispheric mean temperatures were as warm, or the extent of warm regions as expansive, as those in the 20th century as a whole, during any period in medieval times. 2013 report. AR5 prefers the term medieval climate anomaly to medieval warm period. Chapter 5, Section 5.3.5.1 discussed work since AR4 on the MCA and LIA. It notes that the timing and spatial structure of the MCA and LIA are complex, with different reconstructions exhibiting warm and cold conditions at different times for different regions and seasons. A combination of NH temperature reconstructions shows mostly warm conditions from about 950 to about 1250 and colder conditions from about 1450 to about 1850, which are taken to represent the times of the MCA and LIA. They express high confidence that the mean NH temperature of the last 30 or 50 years exceeds 30 or 50-year means of the past 800 years. A medium confidence that the last 30 years were likely the warmest 30-year period of the last 1,400 years.